so far from home. Everything felt so quiet before. Maybe that's why I'm supposed to be here. I needed change. That's why I started this journey. Shares my hunger for blind eyes to see, for the release of forgiveness, for closed hearts to open, real love, salvations. This is our passion. This is our adventure. This is outreach. need you more than I even know. I need you more than I even know. I need you more than I even know. I need you more than I even know.
So, we've been in Norway for the past 4 days, getting to know some of the long-termers and what they see taking place here in the nation of Norway. And what if I told you that two countries in two very different geographical locations in the world actually have a lot more in common than one would expect? Take a look at these photos. This is a guy named Hans Nielsen Hauge, and these are the circuit riders. You see, 200 years ago in the 1800s, something took place in both of these nations, and it's happening once again. So the story begins here, in a small district in Norway called Østfold, in this little town, Rolvsøy. This is where Hans Nielsen Hauge was born and spent most of his childhood, until he had this super wild experience in a field where God met him in that place.
And wherever he went, the gospel just exploded. And then he was also very skilled in different handcrafts, how to make salt. He could do other, he had a business mind, so he helped people start businesses. So the economy started growing, and basically a revival broke out over big parts of the nations.
Now, what's fascinating is that at the exact same time, a very similar type of movement was being birthed in America. It's a movement that today has become known as the Circuit Riders. It started out of the Methodist Church, where preachers would ride on horseback all around the country. They've become well known for revival and their willingness to ride through any winter storm and overcome any trial to get to the next town in their circuit to speak. So after talking a bit more, we learned that this movement is happening again in both of these countries in the form of the Circuit Riders.
I have an encounter with the Lord where he sent a messenger, and he said, I represent those that are about to ride through the night to declare a message of a revolution that will lead to revival and reformation. And then the messenger spoke again. He said, the Lord is about to release his circuit riders across America again. And all of a sudden, it's these wild-eyed revivalists, was the phrase. And they had fire in their eyes, and they're just consumed, and they're crisscrossing America into the nations of the earth.
Basically, Amy Ward had a similar encounter about Norway being a circuit rider nation. And this is what we're dreaming about. We're dreaming about a generation that are willing to say yes to Jesus' call, to share the gospel, to believe for the miracles, to believe that the high schools and the universities can be changed. And we're dreaming about a whole generation, hundreds of people being trained, thousands of people being sent, and thousands of people being saved.
Which leads us to what is taking place today, in our time.
This last trip, I felt like God said, he wanted to have us find 20 people that would kind of be circuit riders to go around the nation and call young people to missions. Then their outreach team has 20 people on it, and they're basically doing the circuit rider word.
You see here, these are the modern day circuit riders.
Where are we going tonight?
Kristen soon.
Yes, they may not look the same, but their vision and their goal remains. Riding circuits all around America and Norway where nothing stops them and nothing holds them back. They are simple and sacrificial men and women with a message, compelled by love and recognizing the power of the simple gospel to save, awaken, and catalyze a generation for Jesus.
Said she felt peace, and then she was just like, I surrender my life to Jesus. Like, it's so awesome.
And it doesn't end here. The revivals that started in the late 1700s began and ended in their respective countries. However, now in our time, 200 years later, it's spreading. The revivals are leaving the borders of their own countries into the nations of the world. What used to be national movements of God have now become global. So there's so much happening all around. In Norway, they've been circuit riding for the past 2.5 years. In America, even longer than that. And if you guys want to get involved, this summer there's a school called 21 Project happening both in Norway and in America. It's a 3-week program where you get trained and equipped to find out who you are, but also how to reach your high schools and the universities. And if you feel called to even longer than that, there's something called CR Experience, which I'll link down below. And there's also YWAM DTS is happening all around the world. So if you guys want to get even more involved, I'm going to link all those resources down below. And next week, we're gonna go to the Arab Gulf to see how mission sparked in that region of the world and what is currently taking place. It's a fascinating story, so I hope you guys will tune in next Thursday for the next release.
하나님은 나의 존재를 사랑하신다.
날 포기하지 않는다. 신실하시다. After having a graduation, my mom told me there's a YWAM.
Through a girl who was in my school, she did her DTS last year and she posted about it on Instagram.
부모님이 YWAM 오셨어요. 제가 8살 때까지 이제 간사님으로 사역을 하셨어서
저희 오빠가 대학교에서 YWAM 동아리를 해가지고 알게 됐어요. DTS를 다녀온 교회 사람들을 통해서 알게 되었습니다. 안전지대에서 벗어나면 인생이 바뀔 거라고 하나님이 저한테 그랬어요. 좀 쉬고 싶기도 하고 스위스도 가고 싶고.
I just thought it was a bunch of Christian teenagers traveling around the world, so I decided to apply.
지쳐 있었던 것으로부터 회복하고 싶었어요. 하나님 안에서 삶에 대한 목적을 찾고 싶었어요. people,
용서,
공동체, 한국 음식, 밥,
adapting,
아울리치, 언어, people, 공동체, 아울리치, 친구들,
아울리치,
growing,
숲, 찬양, 탄자니아,
이집트,
브라질이요, 멕시코, 유럽이요,
Brazil,
이집트, 메xico. When we first get there were 3 chickens like walking around the stage and it was so hilarious.
제가 가르쳤던 학생분들이 이제 저를 위해서 목걸이를 선물해 줬던 기억이 납니다.
기도실이 없어서 동산 벤치에서 기도를 하는데 눈을 뜨면 앞에 토끼가 있고 또 눈 감았다 또 눈 뜨면 치탁이 있고 또 눈을 뜨면 양이 있고 동물들하고 같이 기도를 했었어요. 저희가 나라를 되게 여러 나라로 갔는데 그 나라에서 계속 부채춤만 엄청 많이 췄어요.
So for ministry, we went to a school to paint and clean the classrooms. But when we arrived, the teachers had prepared a big breakfast for us with the best coffee I've ever had in my life.
어린이 사역이라고 해가지고 막 율동이랑 이런 거 준비해가지고 딱 도착했는데 막 우락부락한 문신남들이 있었어요. God is good.
나의 존재를 사랑하신다.
하나님은 날 포기하지 않는다. Prayer. 제 오리지널 디자인이 꽃이라는 거예요. 주의 말씀은 내 발의 등이다. 하나님은 사랑이시고 선하시다는 거.
DTS는 나에게 광야다.
선물이다. 체격줄이다. 안경이다. 강해물 달리기다. The beginning of my life.
Sensational.
에스프레소 같은 것이다. 다시 할까요?
The feeling of being unwelcomed, unknown, and unwanted are ones so present in our lives today, especially when we don't belong. But there is a safe place, free from the past, where you can connect to the truth and be known by the truth. The invitation is yours. It has your name on it. In this community, you are accepted at the table, loved and cared for.
At the Table DTS is a 6-month school located at YWAM Rooster in South Africa. And we are an extension of Jesus' ministry at his table. And we believe that Jesus has extended his invitation to all, and it's an inclusive invitation for everybody to be there with him. And it's a place to be known and to know him. And we found that there's a lot of healing and wholeness to be found there.
At the Table DTS is for everyone, and does include people that feel outcasted, people that feel judged by others, people that are not always happy. We also include those that are happy, that feel whole, that feel complete with Jesus.
We want you because we believe that there's an invitation for everybody to come and join at the table of Jesus. You might not know that, you might not be aware of that, but we believe that, so we want to invite you to find a place of belonging, of knowing, to be loved and cared for. And so, join us at the table and belong and discover more about God, about community and yourself.
찬양하리라 영원히 높임을 받으신 그 이름 찬양하리라 그리스도 진리로 다스리네 온 땅이여 찬양하 거룩하신 그 이름 찬양하라 주는 그리스도 진리로 다스리네 모두 기뻐하라 온 땅이여 찬양하라 주는 그리스도 진리로
This particular mission, one of our values is we believe that the family, every member of the family is part of the missionary team. Now that's different than some missions. Some missions, it's the father that's called and the mother is not a part of that or the children are not a part of it. In our particular mission, that is a strong value that each and every person in that family unit is called to be a part of the team. And so it doesn't work, Mom, for you to try to come in on Dad's call. It won't fly. You maybe will be able to handle it for a little while, but not very long. And we need to be able to see that the whole family is called. In Isaiah it says, I and the children that God has given me are for signs and wonders. And I want you to be encouraged that God has a call on you as a family. Now, we serve an absolutely just and kind God. And it's really important for you to understand that. That if God calls the father to go to Afghanistan, to serve on the other side of the world, the mother's got to have the call as well, and the children, and that God has everybody in mind. I remember when I had our first child, Karen, we were living in a village in Switzerland. I couldn't hardly speak enough French to order bread. My mother was on the other side of the ocean. We were almost all singles then. I was the only mom, and everybody was looking at me and how I was going to raise this kid, and I felt a little nervous anyway. You know, you always do with your first. Lauren's away on a trip. I have my baby in my arms, and I'm just being kind of silly, and I've got the baby, and I'm rocking back and forth. Your father's gone away, boo-hoo, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. And I'm just acting silly like that. And boy, I got immediately convicted by the Lord. Is this how you want this kid to grow up? Her father's gone away, boo-hoo, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. Is that it? I want you to recognize, Darlene, it's a privilege to be married to a man of God. And that I will never call her father away to her detriment. I am both kind and just, and I am committed to every single member in the family. It's a real important principle. I've heard people say, you know, you gotta have God first, the family second, and your ministry third. I don't really believe that. I believe it's God first, God second, and God third. And a just and kind God, when we seek him in detail and we walk in his will, the family's all going to be taken care of. All of them are going to be taken care of. The little kids and the big kids, because he doesn't love Lauren more than he loved Karen and David. He's just as committed to them as he is to Lauren. And so when we walk into the call of God, we've got to remember that God's called us together as a family, and he will always be just and always kind in all of his dealings with us. And we look and we hang on for the justice of God, and he will be absolutely just to you. During this period of time, I'm going to tell you probably a lot of stories. I got to tell them most about my kids because they're the ones that I know the best. They were not perfect children. I was not a perfect mother. They didn't have a perfect father, but we have a perfect Heavenly Father. And that's the point of reference, my friends. This word, I know you know this, but I always have to remind you. This is the manual for running our lives. It is the stories and the scriptures and the words of wisdom for every detail that we ever needed. It will tell us how to relate to each other. And during that time that I mentioned, as I was raising Karen, and I didn't know how to do it, I felt like I was reminded that this was the manual and that there probably was guidance about how to raise little kids there, because God designed the family. And I begin to read and look for scriptures. I think I counted at my last count on my own personal concordance. I had about 65 scriptures about how to raise kids. Through the years, I made it a point to go back to those scriptures continually. So many times it was through the wisdom of God's word that the wisdom that I needed at that time was there. So recognize that we have the best platform right here. Like most folks, I really like my kids. Committed them to the Lord from the time that I knew they were going to be. Dedicated them to the Lord. But we were also dedicated to a higher call. I was sharing with some ladies just the other day and said, you know, God's convicted me about a whole lot of stuff during my lifetime. We won't get into that or we'd probably never get finished. But the one thing he's never convicted me about was neglecting my children for the ministry or neglecting the ministry for my children. Now that's because of his great grace, but also because he was so good to allow me to know what to do, when to make my schedule this way, how much ministry to be involved in. And we're going to talk about some of the practical aspects of raising our kids within that kind of setting, because we've never been called to neglect our families, but we've also been called to extend the kingdom of God. How does that all work together? How do we do it in a practical sense? So I'll give you what helps I have during this time, and we'll work together to see how we can extend the kingdom of God and that our family can truly be for signs and wonders. We want to do that, don't we? Talk about coming into a community setting in which people have prayed for that facility and that place. And some of you will have that experience of being pioneers. That's where I grew. The harder it is, really, I guess, in truth, the better I like it. And there is just no joy, at least from my way of thinking, like being the pioneer. See, you could walk onto the campus in Hawaii and you could see these big buildings and you could think, boy, isn't this great and isn't this lovely and so on. But you don't know what I know about those buildings. I know what it was like to march around that property when it was all weeds and holes and the rest, and stand on one of those places and say, I believe that this will be the future Go Center. I got to be there when we would pray all night. It wasn't always easy, but look for ways to get your children to participate in the big picture. In fact, the Go Center, which is like the conference center at the university, I stand in there and I lecture into the big room, And I look at the walls and I think, I've got a secret that you folks don't know anything about. I know what's behind that wallboard. Because I remember when we thought that building would never, ever get built. And we put out 2x4s, or you call them 4x2s. But we put out boards, timber, and nails, and stain. And we put it all in little bundles, and we put all these boards out. And I and the children that God has given me, we went out there and we bought some of those boards. And all the children wanted to buy boards. And so as parents, we'd help them buy the boards. And on those boards, they put their name. And on those boards, we wrote scriptures. I know it's painted over, but I know it's there right in the wall. The kids knew we had given everything we had. I heard them in the next room talking, and I wondered what they were doing, and I could hear this noise going on. So they came in looking quite serious. They had a towel. And David, who is usually the spokesman for the crowd, he came and he said, Mom, we knew that you guys gave everything you had for the hotel. And we decided that we wanted to give everything we have too. So here's everything from our piggy banks. I think it probably added up to about $12. Now, the kids had a goal, and that's what this money was being saved for, was to get new bikes. I shouldn't say new bikes, to get new bikes, but it would be their first bike. And if you remember the first bike you got, that was your first time for a little bit of independence, and that's a really big purchase. We've already looked in the Sears catalog. We know they cost $49, and you have to pay tax and all that kind of stuff. So there went the bikes. The kids were excited to be a part of this because they were living through all of this with us and the joy of God's provision, and they didn't want to get left out. Probably was 3 days later, some people came through to visit me from where I had been as a high school student. I had worked for these people while I went to high school. I had cleaned house for them and become friends with them. They were visiting in Hawaii, and they came to visit us. When they left 2 little coin purses for the kids underneath their pillows. Well, you know the rest of the story. They opened up those coin purses, and in them, each was a $50 bill. Of course, when Grandpa heard this story, he sent the additional money to pay the tithe and the tax. And they got their new bikes. But they also got to help purchase a hotel. Don't leave your children out. Give them the joy of participation in whatever it is that we have. There was a season after we got into this hotel when you'd think after we went through all of that to get it, that through a series of events too complicated to go into right now, we almost lost the hotel. We were about to be foreclosed on. The children at this time were in a King's Kids boot camp. They were getting ready to go to an outreach in Tortosa, Spain, and they were meeting during this time. And God used the children to lead us through one of the greatest moves of God I have ever been in, and I've had the privilege of being in quite a few. We had about a week before the July 15th when we would be foreclosed on. The children would wait in prayer, and as adults in leadership, we would be waiting in prayer. And the King's Kids leader, Dale Kaufman, would come down and say, the kids are feeling such and such. They feel like we should have a give-a-thon. We should give away everything that we can. We'd already given all the money we had. We didn't have anything else to give. And so we set up a table, and people put down things on this table, and then you could come and get it. And if there was something there that you needed, then you would give it. You would take that, and then you would put something down. And there was such a feeling of generosity around us. Now, you know when it's a real move of God, when little kids come to your door and say, do you have any trash I could take out? And they don't ask for money for it. Can we help you wash dishes? Because after we'd given all the finances we'd had, after we had laid out anything extra that we had, then we felt like the Lord challenged us to keep on giving. And then we started giving more services to one another. And the children led us in this move. We felt like it was to be a time, there was great spiritual warfare. But when we finished the season of spiritual warfare, we felt like there was to be a time of worshiping. And instead of having a 24-hour prayer chain, we were having a 24-hour worship chain. And I can remember going up there about midnight, which was my hour from maybe midnight till 1. And a 6-year-old was there with her dad. And she was the one that was prophesying in the tent. I remember clearly how God spoke through this child. And they led us during that time. The night before, we're to lose the facilities. We have not seen anything happen. But we wrote out this big document. And we wrote on this that we had had this great cloud of witnesses because the night before we had started maybe at 7 o'clock at night and went till 12 midnight, in which we talked about how God had provided this hotel for us. And we marked down all of this and said, when God said we needed to paint, he brought in paint. When we needed food, he gave us fish. When we needed this, he did that, and he did that. And then we all signed this document and said, well, there's no logical or intelligent reason to believe God's changed now. If he gives us the property, fine. If this has been the season, fine. It's okay with us. And we planned a big party for the night of July 15th. Because no matter what, we know our God would have provided. But on July 14th, again, led by the children, they felt like we were to sleep outside. And so we did. We slept outside that night, and we all made big posters like, God is faithful, God is just, God will provide. And we went out there and we put all our bedrolls out and we stuck our stake in the ground that said, God is faithful. And we said to the Lord, if you take this whole facility, which we had prayed for and seen God do the miraculous for, it doesn't matter. What matters is the ministry is going on. The ministry of Youth with a Mission of the university in Kona, Hawaii will go on, facility or no facility. The ministry is not limited to this building. And this is the building, friend, we had the word of the Lord for and miracles. But we slept on the ground. I will never forget that night. It was a great big moon, so bright and beautiful. And people worshiping all night up there in the tent. And so you would hear the music of the songs being sang. And I walked around and I'd see these little families, you know, with the covers underneath their chins. Their stake in the ground. God is faithful. And then we got up at 5 o'clock that morning, blew the trumpets for everybody to come. Police came too because we disturbed the neighbors. And then we marched around that property, be a couple hundred of us. We marched around that property and we stood in the sight of the future School of Early Childhood Education. And we believed for God to provide the Ghost Center that I've just described to you. We believed God for all of these things, and we stood in those places and we said, God, we believe you for these. Phone call came. Financial area turned around and our place was saved. But besides that, we were given on that same time another facility. Some of you are familiar with the Makapala property. A wonderful another facility, turnkey, able to have many schools on another part of the island. God is faithful. God is faithful. And now these same children that lived with us through all of those kinds of things, Many of them are believing God to take over media land. Many of them are believing God to do big things in the diplomatic corps someplace. Many of them are believing God to get them into a hidden people group. Why wouldn't God fulfill a great big vision? It's all they've ever known. And sure, there's times when you eat fish and eat lentils, but who has such a glorious adventure? If it's an adventure for you, friends, in the ways of God, it will be an adventure for your children. And we serve a remarkable God. And so this wonderful community that God's called us to, this belongs to us. We lived in that hotel for most of my kids' growing up years. Our children never had their own bedrooms until they were 17 and 19 years of age. We had these 3 rooms that were, I was pleased to be there for the rest of our lives. It didn't matter. I really thought it was a very nice place. We'd fixed it up cute. We enjoyed it. And then to our astonishment, that God begins to provide for us. Some of you are aware, on our 25th year of the mission, offerings and gifts were taken for us to have a house. And we have the most gorgeous house you could ever want. And we're heading out to live where we don't even know where we're going to live. We're ready to go for another adventure. We've rent the house out. Someday we'll return to it. But this facility in Hawaii is precious to me because I've seen the faithfulness of God. Also, we've helped work on that facility. Our whole family has worked on that facility. We've painted, we've pulled weeds. And we have a different kind of lifestyle when maybe you live in just 2 rooms or 3 rooms, but who keeps up the corporate? Do I only get the benefits? Do my children learn that we don't have to worry about washing dishes because other people wash dishes? We don't have to learn about doing food prep because we've got other YWAMers that do that, and we just stand in line and we get blessed. We have other people that do all of these kinds of things. There is not enough work for a child to learn how to work in 2 rooms. And besides that, they need to give input into the corporate. And our children have the most wonderful work resumes because they have done all kinds of jobs. And so we would have, for a long time, we had to have, because this place was so overgrown and so much extra work, for a long, long time, friends, we worked every single Saturday, pulling weeds and doing all of that. And I always liked to get the kids. So I'd get the kids and I'd run the kids' crew. But it was our facility. And not every day do you get thrilled about pulling weeds, believe me. But that's sort of beside the point. It's ours. And our children need to be involved in the corporate. Now, I've been real surprised at parents. A lot of parents don't seem to feel like their kids need to work. To me, that's part of life. and when we read those scriptures, we see that in the Proverbs that I said to you the other day, that we're not to have lazy children. There's a lot in the Word about how to work. I'll give you a Bible study on it. And so our children need to participate. And that also gives them a great, great respect for those that do that kind of work. If you get the garbage detail and you have to pick up the litter, you know how much work it is. You don't litter. And so figure out ways for your children. Now, we were just so blessed by people that wanted to help our kids be good workers. And they got to do so many jobs. And we looked early in their lives. I was always trying to see what kind of gifts did they have in them. And it was so obvious Karen was going to be a preschool teacher. She'd rather play with little kids and teach them and read to them than be out with her peers. She always liked little kids. So I went to the preschool leader, the teacher over the whole preschool. It was summertime, kids aren't in school. And Karen was 9 years old. I said, would it be possible? Karen needs a summer job, just for an hour or two. Would it be possible for her to come in and do something in the preschool? Could she help? Well, of course, the preschool teacher's thrilled to have this little extra helper. And what's happening, Karen's finding out, yeah, she really is called to be a preschool teacher. And I tried to think in terms of, as the children got older, before they were old enough to get outside jobs, what kind of work experience would be beneficial to them? I think it was the summer that David was 10 years old. Well, maybe a little older, maybe 12. And we asked him to be the runner from one office to another. Sounds very important, doesn't it? And so he would go and he would pick up mail, and he would be the in-service mail director, you know. He would take all of these things from one place to another, and because the campus was big, sometimes people had to have letters posted, and that he could take his bike and do that. So it was a pretty good job. Not too many hours. But going to people and asking other people to supervise your child, because they like to work for somebody else and likes to feel like a real job. And all the times they're learning. Our kids learn to be receptionists, learn to work. David got the thrill of his life. I have to throw this story, part of the story in, while he's a runner. There was this old, dirty man, I mean really dirty, who kept coming by the international office to see Lauren. I always tried to be gracious to him, and each time Lauren was not there. Finally, I said to him, is there any chance that you would see me? He looks all around. He says, well, yes, if it could be by ourselves. So I said, okay, we'll come in here and we'll close the door. So he sits down across from my desk, has this briefcase that's half falling apart. And he said, I felt like God wanted me to do something, and I wanted to give it to Lauren because I know he knows where the biggest needs are in the world. And I know he knows the people that need Bibles. And I want to help do that. And he starts bringing out $100 bills and lays them on the desk until we have $10,000 in $100 bills. And do you know what I'm thinking the whole time? Oh, I shouldn't be in here. My name is Cunningham, and I'm with all this money. There's nobody else. I was so nervous because we've always been so careful about that kind of thing. So I said to him, write a receipt, and you tell me how much money there is. And this man had such a burden for all of this. And so it gathered all the money up. And of course, our runner has to take these things from one place to another. So David came in, and I had this money, of course, all wrapped up in bills and in packets and all. I said, David, look at how much money there is here. I told him the story. And I said, now, you have to walk with this money over to the accounting office, which would be like from here to the back of this stage, back of the building. And I said, do you think you can handle this? I said, and I called the accountant, and I said, now David's coming through the door, and he has a very important package for you. And I said, he'll need to have you sign for it so that we know it really gets there. So David got us all in his backpack and looks to the right and the left. I'm watching out the window, and the accountant's watching out the window. And the runner really had a job. Later, I saw him letting the kids touch his backpack. It is a grand adventure, friends.
Hello, my name is Liz. I come from Brazil. How did I meet Jesus? When I was little, but not too little. When I was 2, I prayed and I was talking to Jesus then, and then he bring me to the sun. He's our King. My favorite Bible story is about Mary and Joseph. The story is about they take care when Jesus was a kid. They had a baby. Jesus, he's good because he takes care of us and he protects us. Lord Jesus, thank you for the creation. Thank you because for all my friends, for my family. In Jesus' name, amen. Goodbye.
The DLS is an extraordinary course. We don't know how, but we can learn English in just 1 year. For some people, even 9 months is enough. God is with us, and without God, it would not be possible. Living with more than 40 nations represented, worshiping Jesus together, making new friends, and learning about their cultures, it's just a small piece of the big cake. What surprised me is that I learned much more than just English. I have been working in a community project called Building Hope, and I could put in practice what I believe about God's kingdom. I could learn how to be an ambassador of God's kingdom. I had the time to create a deep relationship with God, and I could know Him more. Come to ELS, because the nations are waiting for your English.
was out in the middle of the Caribbean, and the Lord gave me a vision, a picture in my mind, a movie. And it was waves of young people going from everywhere to everywhere by the millions.
The harvest is ready. We have to go. We won't stop till the whole world knows the power in your blood to save every soul. We're not ashamed of the gospel. Jesus, you.
As Christians, we're normally not terribly interested in history, but what we must realize in reading the Bible is that God thinks it's important.
Roger, understand. Go for landing. 3,000 feet.
All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Good evening, my fellow Americans.
That our men were coming home.
On July 20th, 1969, man went to the moon.
The young people come from all over the world and from many different backgrounds and denominations to meet together at this unique school in Switzerland.
For many of the young people, the training began in a summer of service in Europe, Asia, Africa, or America. Clearly, God was uniquely preparing these young workers for the challenge of Munich as they witnessed on the streets, someplace or any place in the world. The tiny village of Herlack was deluged by more than 1,000 Jesus revolutionaries.
Fight truth and decay, read your Bible today. My friends, the living solution. Well, it's a revolution of love.
I would to God that would have been 50,000 Christian young people that might say we're ragged and poor. That part doesn't matter, but we're changing the world for the cause of Christ.
Beginning with their early morning wait for the train, the YWAMers' day was continuously punctuated with prayer. The world watched in horror when their best attempt at brotherhood, the Olympic Village, where athletes from around the world were to live in peace and harmony, exploded into a battlefield. While the memorial service for the murdered Israelis was taking place, the Christian young people quietly prayed on the streets. They sang, and they comforted the angry, confused public. At last, the police gave in and permitted the Christians to march. They marched in sympathy for the Israeli victims, distributing 10,000 flowers to the people to illustrate to Munich and to the world that only in Jesus' love was there a real basis for brotherhood.
Those first young students spread out around the world, and from the first Go base exploded first 3, then 8, 17, and 80 centers, some 80 schools in 80 countries in a short 12 years. God was multiplying. More than 100,000 volunteers acted in obedience between 1970 and 1980, creating a caring army with arms stretched right around the globe.
One thing about YWAM in those few years before that, whatever you do, you pray about it. I prayed about it, and that's when the Lord said, YWAM is going to have a university, and you're going to be a part of developing that.
picture of the ship that we purchased a few months ago. It was called the Victoria. It's now called the Anastasis, which in Greek means resurrection.
But from the word of the Lord about ships and university, it came at the same time. The twins were born the same year, the campus here in Kona, and the first ship to be a fully developed ship in YWAM came in 1978 as well. In Italy, they purchased this liner. They renamed her the Anastasis.
Well, it's a joy to be able to be with you. You know, I love this mission. I don't love it because I'm married to Mr. YWAM. I'd be a YWAMer without him. I just love this mission.
So many times I've tried to tell you, but I don't think you've been listening. There's nothing I want to try and sell you, 'cause his love is free. You're so proud of saying you're a seeker, but why are you searching in the dark? You won't learn a thing until you soften your heart.
What about God? What does he think about the poor and the needy? How does he feel about their suffering? We serve a God who weeps, who's brokenhearted, a God who suffers with those who suffer.
If you're a teenager or younger, you're part of a generation that is being viciously attacked.
If just this once I could show you your empty life.
We need to talk to Muslims, talk to Jews, and say we acknowledge that those attitudes and those actions were wrong. That's why the reconciliation walk has been proposed. That's why it's already underway.
College of Communication, training Christian communicators for all nations. The University of the Nations is YWAM's global university dedicated to equipping students to serve worldwide in every sphere of life. The university is divided into 7 educational areas, one of them being communications. Because we live in an age of information, Christians must have a wide base of knowledge and experience in many areas of communications in order to be a strong advocate for their beliefs.
We need to tap into what God has as a plan so that we can have this wonderful tool that we can share in changing your nation for Christ.
Yeah, this is cool.
I will preach the gospel of die and be forgotten as long as you get the glory. And I will preach the gospel of die and be forgotten as long as you get the glory. I will preach the gospel of die and be forgotten as long as you get the glory. Preach the gospel of die and be forgotten as long as you get the glory. Jesus, your word. Yeah. Come on. It's all for your glory. Till every soul is one. Jesus, your word.
We still hear the challenge of Christ. Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. As long as there is still unreached millions, the laborers are few. God is still seeking for the willing youth that will present himself to be trained for service. It all begins as we hear his voice.
first love. We are returning to our first love, where nothing matters more than Jesus, and His word is our delight. First love, we are returning to our first love, where nothing matters more than Jesus, and His word is our delight. And we recall all the good things that the Lord has done, and we fall down at the feet of Jesus. We give our all, surrender now into your hands. We're turning back to you, Jesus. It's all in vain if you're not with us. Light this place up with your presence. It is you who gives us life. And we recall all the good things that the Lord has done, and we fall down at the feet of Jesus. We give our all, surrender now into your hands. We're turning back to you. It's only you, Jesus. Over time, turn back. Take us back, take us back. Coming back, back to where we first found you. Take us back. We're coming back. Jesus, come renew. Turn our hearts to you. Take us back. We're coming back. Back to where we first found you. Take us back. We're coming back. Jesus, come renew us. Turn our hearts to you with our first love. We are returning to our first love, where nothing matters more than Jesus, and His word is our delight. We recall all the good things that the Lord has done, and we fall down at the feet of Jesus. We give our all, surrender now into your hands. We're turning back to you. Yes, we're turning back to you. We're turning back to you.
Two years ago, 7 leaders came together to dream about a new era of missions and evangelism for the world. where the everyday believer was activated to reach their mission field, whether they're neighbors or the nations. That dream became a reality on February 23rd, 2019, where 60,000 of us joined together with 250,000 online to unite around Jesus and declare a war on inaction. But from the start, we knew it would take more than one stadium. The war on inaction has only begun, and the time to send is not just for the few, but for everyone. We can't stop until a whole generation has been activated, until the whole world has heard the sound of go. October 2020, we are calling 70,000 believers to gather together in Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City for a catalytic gathering to make the sound of go so loud a whole generation could hear.
Hi, I'm Bevan with GlobalCast Resources. And these days, more and more, we understand that story is important, storytelling is important, that every culture seems to be wired for story. They prefer to receive important information through stories, not just information. And yet, when it comes to missions mobilization, often we just start slipping right into task mode, into information mode. Here's the statistics, here's the charts, and I think it misses a piece of people's hearts and what motivates them. Often people are already thinking, I know I don't pray and give and go enough, and you're going to just highlight that for me. And so all that information is important, and yet we'd love to advocate for reframing missions away from just task to the larger story that God is telling. That is an invitation to find our place, our role in this epic narrative that goes from Genesis to Revelation. So this is really how it is. God is telling the master storyteller, and He's inviting you and I in on this epic that from the beginning, there's a crisis, and there's this promise that there's going to be a head crushing and heel bruising, and this theme that just ties the whole story together of God's desire to bless His people, and through His people bless all the nations. And then at the end of the story, there's this party. There's a party at the end of the story, and who's at the party? The bride of Christ, and she's made up of every nation, tongue, and tribe. So we can easily make a case that this is not just the task of trying to check off people groups off the list and try to get workers there and all those very real but hard things. It's also this privilege to have a role in this epic that God is telling that ends with a wedding feast of the bride marrying the Lamb. And so I love it. I love highlighting the fact that in this story, important story, you would think only important people get to play. And yet God has an incredible track record of picking the least of these to play important roles in this story. Fishermen and tax collectors and shepherds, young kids to play important roles in this epic story that he's telling. And so we can easily approach missions mobilization in a way that highlights that reality. God is telling an amazing story. It's filled with romance. Yeah, there's the bride, there's a bridegroom. It's filled with conflict. Yeah, there is a bad guy, and it's overcoming evil with good. It's like, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. All of those things are part of this massive story that we are all invited in on. And not just the important people, but the least of these, the weak, are invited to play key roles in this story. So all we need to have is this: I'm available, I'm willing, here am I, send me. We don't need to be great in any other sense. This is missions mobilization. This is exactly how God is operating. And so we, as missions mobilizers, I think, can do well to reframe missions in terms of the story that God is telling and not just the task that needs to be accomplished.
هون شوف كيف هون ما في هون ورق
من زمان يعني ولا؟
لا هذا من يومين
طيب ممكن بقرا مرة ثانية بالآية أنا بعرفها بالإنجليزي معليش إذا بقرا بالإنجليزي.
ما مشكلة.
Okay. Our Father is in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come and your will be done in the body of Ibrahim. بالاسم المسيح. آمين. أنا صليت الملكوت الله تعالى على الأرض بنفس الطريق زي السماء.
إن شاء الله.
في شيء فرق أو لسه في وجه؟
إن شاء الله.
طيب ما في؟ عن جد؟ ولا إشي؟
ولا إشي.
عن جد, he said there's no more pain. Really?
Really?
عن جد ما في إشي. Before I moved to the Middle East, I didn't know Muslims. I didn't grow up in a city that had Muslims. First time I saw a Muslim was on CNN on 9/11. So I had a very one-sided view where Islam to me was extremism. There was no difference. And that changed a few months after I moved to the Muslim world. I was walking down the road and there was a young man walking towards me. He was a young, really religious man. Sheikh is what they call them, and wearing the traditional gown, wearing a skull cap, his beard really long, his mustache shaved. You know, I see him and I have all of these prejudices and these preconceived notions about people who look like him. And as we were walking past one another, our eyes met, and I had a moment in my life, a very significant moment, where I saw an open vision. And in that vision, I saw this young man's life the years before. I saw that for years he had studied all these books, really with an earnest, sincere desire to know God. Studying these books day and night, and never did he actually find the way to God. No one ever told him. Right there on the street, I was just moved to the core of my being, because I thought, that man, I judged him for being some extremist, when all he had was a sincere desire for God, and no one that ever told him how to find him. Well, I always wanted to be a missionary because when I was a kid, all my friends wanted to be firefighters and cops, but I wanted to be a sumo wrestler and missionary to Japan, because then I thought I could reach the lost people of Japan as well as eat whatever I want. So that was really the first intrigue. And the second one, I was 14 and I watched an Oprah Winfrey after-school special about street children in Eastern Europe, and I wept for 2 hours. 2 hours just weeping. My mother comes home, says, "What's happening?" I said, "I don't know, I was watching Oprah." And then that was the moment where I thought, I'm called to missions. And then again, when I was 16, I had a dream where the Lord spoke to me about the Arab world. I came as a 20-year-old fully anticipating to be the next Heidi Baker. I was pretty convinced I was the next big thing, and everyone was just really privileged to meet me. But the reality is I got here and I became so aware of my own darkness, my own issues, my own need for Jesus. And really, I became aware of how little I knew Jesus. I'm living in a nation where everyone believes in God, but no one actually, or very few actually know who Jesus is. So a few months after living here, I had this dream, and in this dream, I am an old man, and I'm telling these people a story. And I'm telling them the story about Jesus as if I had walked with him in my younger years, in the flesh. And I'm telling them about the sound of his voice, the tone of his voice when he spoke. And I'm telling them about the calluses on his hands, these rough hands that have known work, that were so familiar to me. And I told him about his scent when he walked into the room, that he smelled like, I remember in this dream, he smelled like sawdust and a hard day's work. And it was such a familiar thing. And I began to tell these people about these natural attributes of Jesus, that Jesus was a man with natural attributes like anyone else I knew. And I woke up from that dream and I was so moved, because I thought, I don't know that man. My whole life I've said I've known that man. Even today, I've given up everything for that man, and yet I don't really even know him. And I realized then that before I could share Jesus with people who don't know him, I had to know him myself, and I had to meet him. And so my first probably 2 years in the field were actually just meeting Jesus. What does it mean to know a man, to serve a God who took on flesh, who actually walked on the earth, to know his ways, know his characteristics? That was what it was, and it helped to be in the Middle East, because Jesus was a Middle Eastern man. In my Western thinking, I'm so much about the task: save the nations, do this, train these people, send them out. Jesus was about relationships. Middle Easterners about relationships. Yeah, there's a goal. What's important is the people you interact with between the beginning and the end, and seeing that goal. And that's what it was for me, is learning, what does it mean that Jesus always stopped for people on the road? And you realize that there's not a very big gap between you and them. There's the same things that there were before I knew Jesus. Before I knew Jesus, I had all these ideas about God, all these ideas about religion, but I didn't know about the personal nature of him. And it's the same for that Muslim man, and you start talking about these things, and you start breaking it down, and you realize that between you and him is just a small space. It's the space of one man. It's the space of Jesus. Jesus fits in that space. That at the end of the day, between you and him, the only thing that's missing is Jesus.
كثير وجع.
تعرف أنا بقرأ لناس يعني من الكتاب، إذا بدك ممكن بقرأ عليك عشان الوجع، أطلب من الله الشفاء إذا بدك.
إمتى؟
هلا إذا بدك.
هلا مو مشكلة هون.
مش مشكلة. لا خليك. شو اسمك؟ أنا نسيت.
أنا اسمي إبراهيم.
أنا ميخا.
أنا ميخا.
أهلا. طيب لا
فوت لجوا عشان
شو زي ما بدك.
لا إحنا عشان شارع.
لا معلش. هون بس.
كتير. جيب لك كرسي؟
لا خليك. يا الله أنا بطلب للشفاء لأخي إبراهيم اسم المسيح. في شيء فرق أو لا شيء غير من الوجه؟ فيش. خفيف لسه في وجع أو مش يعني من الأول كان صعب، اللي هلا خفيف ولا
مو صعب.
بس هلا
صعب كثير.
لسه.
شوف.
يا عمي سلامتك رحت على الدكتور؟
لا
لسه
لا
ماشي
كثير وجع هون شوف كيف هون ما في شوف هون ورا
من زمان يعني ولا؟
لا هذا من يومين من يومين
طيب ممكن بقرا مرة ثانية بالآية أنا بعرفها بالإنجليزي معليش بقرا بالإنجليزي
ما مشكلة
Okay. Our Father is in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come and your will be done in the body of Ibrahim. في الاسم المسيح. آمين. أنا صليت الملكوت الله تعالى على الأرض بنفس الطريق زي السماء.
إن شاء الله.
في شيء فرق أو لسه في وجع؟
إن شاء الله.
طيب ما في؟ عن جد؟ ولا إشي؟
ولا إشي.
عن جد he said there's no more pain. Really?
Really?
عن جد ما في إشي.
وين؟
لا مش مني بتعرف شو صار؟
عن جد؟
I said really?
عن جد؟
بتعرف شو صار؟
أنت كنت فريند.
لا اسمع يا أخي اسمع عشان الله بحبك.
الحمد لله.
والله بشوفك في الوجه. عليك عمي. واو أنا فرحان جدا عشان الله بحبك. الحمد لله. واو عن جد ما فيش وجع. واو. It looks like a swelling. نشكر الله.
شوف ميخا.
He's just amazed.
ما كان فيه.
لا he said before he couldn't do that.
ما كان فيه هيك.
آمين يا رب. نشكر الله. لا نشكر الله مش أنا.
Thank you.
بتعرف أنت
ميخا والله ما في وجع.
He swears to God there's no pain. واو نشكر الله. بتعرف في القرآن وفي الإنجيل دائما سيدنا عيسى المسيح بعمل معجزة.
بعمل معجزة نعم.
أيوه. زي هيك ومكتوب في الإنجيل الناس هم يعني مؤمنين عن جد في الله راح يعمل نفس المعجزة زي سيدنا عيسى باسم المسيح.
الحمد لله.
والله هو بيشوفك وهو نشكر الله. الحمد لله.
أنت من زمان تعال.
أنا آسف. أنا متأخر. He said I came late. He said I should have come earlier. Wow. I think the challenge of my life that is all I could offer to others is the challenge of Isaiah 53, that Jesus endured it all, that Jesus alone, he's the only man in all of history who is able to live a perfect life, never sin, although being tempted in every way, never giving in to the pressures of life, never becoming offended at anyone, never at all being upset or harboring anger, even though all that he endured, all the injustice, that he is worth everything we have to give him, that he alone is worth it all. That it's not a burden to follow Jesus. His leadership in our life isn't a burden, but it's in fact the greatest blessing. And that we would throw off the idea that it's hard to follow Jesus. That when we follow his leadership, he's worth our yes. He's worth us saying, no matter what it costs, you endured it all. There's nothing I will endure. There's nothing I will feel. And there's nothing I will experience that he has not experienced already. That he will not be able to say, I know what that feels like. And in the knowledge of the kindness of his heart, it's easy to go on, no matter the cost.
Wow, that was the best. Woo! That messed him up.
Yeah, he was like, his eyes, just like,
did you see?
he looks at you, he said, there's nothing. There's nothing. And I was like, what do you mean? Like nothing happened? And he's like, no, there's nothing.
I was abandoned at the age of 10 months old by my mother. Growing up in a huge orphanage among 2,000 girls was not a very pleasant experience. felt like I was a lost child, unwanted. And I cried myself to sleep every night, hoping and longing to have my own family.
Anu's life experience motivated her to help girls like herself. She did what most people thought was the right thing to do. She started a home for orphaned and abandoned children and took care of 52 girls in 15 years. But Anu realized what she was doing was good, but not the best for children. Running a residential care was not an easy task. Raising funds and finding helpers was becoming difficult. In the year 2014, Anu was burnt out and exhausted, and her resources dried out. She prayed for new strategies to help vulnerable children.
And God began to open our eyes and give us new strategies, and we felt that we need to come out of the residential and getting into the community. Actually going to the root cause of these problems, why the kids are placed in an orphanage. And we thought, okay, we will come as an NGO and we'll screen every family and see what we can do to stop these kids from being sent in an orphanage.
Anu started to work within her community and provided education, food, medical care, and most importantly, a way for children to remain in families. She began to teach skills to single women, widows, and poor families to help them earn an income. She gave them groceries to make sure their children were fed properly. She started community schools in 2 locations. Anu's work has inspired several professionals, local business people, churches, community workers, and families to serve the children in need. 93% of our funds and support come from the locals and within India. This effort has helped over 600 children to stay in a family, in their own surroundings and culture, and not be sent to an orphanage. Since World Without Orphan gathering in 2016, Anu has become more confident and is encouraging others to understand that times are changing, and so must we if we want to see a world without orphans.
I remember this very famous quote of Mother Teresa. She said, "I alone cannot do anything, but I can cast a stone into a sea that could cause many ripples."
I've always believed that long-term missions is something for like really unique and just like those specific people that are called to be a missionary. But I don't think you have to like have any unique qualification, or I don't think you have to be that special person. We're all called to missions. We're all called to go out and proclaim God's word. I think all you need is actually just the heart that is willing to follow God and obey Him in everything He says. I just knew that Jesus was calling me to do this, and one moment I was like standing in front of the mirror and I was like, I know for like 100% I'm sure God is calling me to move here. But if I don't go now, if I don't commit to this, if I don't like actually take a step forward, I'm forever gonna look back to this moment and ask myself the question, why didn't I go? Like, why didn't I obey God? Why didn't I do this? Honestly, the like most precious thing that you have in your life is your time. And if God is asking you to give your time to spend it in another nation, to give your life to spend it in another nation, it's such an honor to do that for God, to give up everything that I could have in my home nation, to like give up my dreams and like that idea of going to university, getting a good job, having a family, building a huge house, and then in the end just living for myself. the only thing I can say is like, it's worth it. I thought I was leaving everything behind and giving everything up, but actually I gained so much and I learned so much through moving to the field.